But I do want to get into and discuss now as Michael Lee's on the line, the great senior NBA writer for The Athletic, wrote a great article about the trouble, but good trouble, that's gone on in the bubble. So, Michael, you can follow him at Mr. Michael Lee on Twitter. Mr. Michael Lee. Michael, how are you this morning? Thanks so much for giving us a few minutes.
Yeah, I'm doing well.
So, Michael, you're because we started the show today, at least my perspective on what's happened this past week, especially with the NBA, is that I think at least the importance of sports getting played was kind of put to the forefront and showed why just the impact and the power that sports has can actually bring about real change. And your article highlights that. But I'm just curious also too, what was your takeaway? Obviously, first with the NBA, but then we saw it trickle down to the WNBA, Major League Baseball, hockey, NFL. Teams and leagues either canceling games, canceling practices, and some way try to bring a light to what happened in the latest police shooting of Jacob Blake. What was just your overall takeaway of all these sports leagues in one way or another using their platform for good and bringing awareness?
I just think we've sort of reached this point where athletes are tired of just being seen as entertainers, and they want to be seen as the whole person. They want, for fans, if you're going to root for me and cheer for me to achieve, as an athlete, then you need to root and cheer for the communities that where I come from. And I think that, for a lot of players, it's like it sort of hit them, especially we saw what the Milwaukee Bucks did by doing the initial, strike. That unless Black Lives Matter, these games don't matter. And I think that's what the message they want to send across. And they're starting to understand the power that they have. You can see it even with college athletics, where they're understanding that, yeah, those they're not getting paid, so they're speaking up because that's the only power that they have is their ability to step on the floor and perform. So when it came to these NBA players, WNBA players, all these others, they want the world to sort of see, yes, we are here to perform. This is what we train to do. This is what we spend our whole lives doing. But you need to see all of what we can contribute to this world, and not just what we can do in terms of giving you comfort and entertainment, at these times.
In your article, you talked to a Western Conference executive, teams not in the bubble, saying that it's important that they keep playing because once they leave, essentially the platform shrinks. So I'm curious, do you kind of agree with that thought process that by the NBA continuing to play the playoffs, to stay in Orlando, that their platform being as big as it is could basically be the best opportunity to enact change and share their message and actually, reach as many people as they're trying to reach?
Yeah, I mean, right now, this is one of the only entertainment outlets that's available to people, in live action sports that, being put on display, on a daily basis, hourly basis, pretty much. And eyeballs of the world are on basketball right now. Season shuts down. Eyeballs of the world go somewhere else. And they're not concerned about what's happening with NBA players, especially if they're not performing. And I think that that's what the players sort of understood is that while they're in that bubble, while they have everyone's attention, they have to take advantage of it. And also, like, if the season did end and they all did go back to their homes and got to spend time with their family, if social justice is what led to them to end the season, what are they going to do when they go home? Athletes, as celebrities, as people who are blessed with financial resources, they have access to power. And they don't necessarily have that access to power if they're just in their house. Marching on the streets is good, but the streets is what's available to people who don't have access to power. So they would basically be squandering what power they have. And I think that's how, they were able to negotiate some things from the owners, while, while doing their strike, they're able to get, arenas to be opened up as voting sites. They're able to, establish a social justice commission, so a number of things sort of came as a result of that. But that power came because they decided to play. If they had just stepped away, I don't know if they would have been able to have their voices heard as much.
So I was just going to say, we're talking Michael Lee, senior NBA writer for The Athletic, at Mr. Michael Lee on Twitter. So you said that right. The three main changes that actually could be implemented right now, right? The creation of the Social Justice Coalition, using the NBA facilities for voting in some sort of way, either booths or registration, and like you said, ads to run to educate and encourage viewers to vote, all came about of this protest that started with the Milwaukee Bucks. So I know you kind of answered, but do you think any of these are even possible if they decide to shut down the league and, like you said, go their own separate ways? Is the NBA creating any of these different social justice, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for here? Just initiatives to help kind of further the cause?
it's unlikely. It's unlikely that the owners would have been on board if they felt like the players burned them. It could have been a much more costly, thing if they had decided to walk away and lost the owners a lot of money. I think that the owners know that they can't make money if the players on the court. But the players know that nobody wins if they're not on the court either. So they were able to leverage that, and I think that was a big takeaway, is that they understood that if this is supposed to be a partnership, if the players and the owners are supposed to be 50-50 partners in this, and the owners have to make some sacrifices too. They need to come and show that they're really behind these players, and support initiatives that are important to them. And so I think that, the owners also say, okay, well, if we give you all this, then you need to perform for us so that we can, make this money together. And I think that's what you saw happen. And I don't even think that's the end. I think that's the beginning of things, because they're still going to have to hold a lot of these owners accountable, because sometimes a lot of things said in duress, the agreements that are made, you can back out of it. But I think the players have to make sure that they're sticking to it, that the owners stick to it, and that they remain committed and vigilant in, what they've agreed to. Otherwise, it could happen again.
So I'm curious, Michael. So then, what do you think the next possible step is? Because we heard, we're seeing big time players like LeBron James really contemplate and think, at that point the season was over. The Lakers and the Clippers both voted to end the season before eventually everyone came back on board and agreed to these different ways again to kind of push the cause and actually implement real change before agreeing to play. LeBron mentioned that there was really no plan, and that's why they didn't want to kind of end the season, because there's just no plan. Do you think there's coming out of this, at least there's a concrete plan going forward? Is it still kind of a lot of work to get done after these three implementations that they've just created?
Well, I sort of disagree with LeBron and saying that, he felt like shutting down the season because there was no plan. Sometimes protest is the plan. If you go all the way back to the Montgomery bus boycott, back in the 1950s, they were supposed to be just a one-day thing. They were supposed to just boycott for one day and then move on. But it lasted for an entire year, and they were able to basically, really hurt Montgomery City, financially, because they weren't providing the support. It was a boycott that actually worked, and it was an effective means to get the change that they required. The one-day protest might not have been enough, but there was no plan. They didn't know what it was going to lead to. They just wanted to make a point to let you know that they were upset with how they were being treated, especially as related to Rosa Parks. But I think that, sometimes the plan is the protest. And sometimes, because some players may look and say, well, we sat out because we were hurting. We sat out because we were feeling the pain of the people in Kenosha. We sat out because we felt the pain of the people in all our communities who are suffering, because they're seeing police that are, murdering, unarmed black citizens without consequence, with impunity. And I think that the power was in what they did, in terms of what raising awareness, to make it seem like, hey, we're athletes. Yeah, we're here to play basketball, and this is what we spend our entire lives training to become. But they also said, hey, we're humans first, and see us for that. And I think there was power in that as well. So even though there was some tangible progress made in terms of, getting people, more prepared to vote and establishing this commission and everything, I think the real power came in not playing. So I didn't care about a plan necessarily. It would have been cool if they had one, but everything that's done doesn't have to be strategic. Sometimes people respond and react because they have to, and that's what the players did. They made people respond and react to what they did.
It's actually a really interesting point, because like I said, right, sometimes it's because obviously, this is all changing by the day, and it's tough to kind of come up with a plan. And it's honestly impressive they were able to come up with a three-pronged plan as quickly as they were, just to have some sort of change happen right now, to actually kind of deliver. And like I said, that's actually an interesting perspective. That right, LeBron was frustrated without a plan, but sometimes, like you said, because that's, to me at least, what we kind of started the show with, saying you see the impact of sports, the power of sports, because all these different leagues decide not to play sends a message, right? So
yeah, and I think that's something that can't be overlooked in all this. And I applaud the players for getting something out of it, getting some sort of concession out of it. But that's not the end. I mean, that's not actually going to, solve the initial issue that they have, which is that an officer was able to fire 7 bullets into the back of Jacob Blake. And, we've still seen, even since George Floyd, we've seen more, unarmed black men be murdered despite all these protests, despite all these, comments about demands for equality and change. Nothing is changing. So the changes in this are going to come just from this plan that was put forth now. Now it's time for the work to be done. And I think that's not just going to require the NBA to save the United States or this country or baseball or football and this. Like, they're not going to be the ones that are going to save the world. But they're going to be able to do things to move the people who can change the world to do it. And I think that to me, that was the power of the week, was just that it wasn't just that they said, okay, we're not playing. It was that they made everybody look up and say, oh my gosh, they're not playing. What do we need to do about this?
Right, and then going back to last week, you had Doc Rivers after that impassioned post-game, almost just plea, just to listen to what we're saying. He said, I should just be a coach. And like you said, right, it's not up to just these sports leagues to be the ones to enact change, but hopefully they can bring attention to the ones in power, to the politicians, to the governments, to actually enact change and actually get a real progress moving forward. Michael Lee, senior writer at the Athletic, at Mr. Michael Lee on Twitter. Wish you had more time, but Michael, really did appreciate your article and really do appreciate you coming on and give us a few minutes here. Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks for having me. Take care.
You as well.